We're here for a look inside Observables. Yes? All right.
Yeah.
So, Bob Fornal, work for a company called Leading Edge out of Columbus, Ohio. Have been focused on front-end code for the last, well, up until a year ago, for the last 14 years. Last year has been kind of a mix of everything with the current client, but we solve problems. It's at the core, it's what we do. Have my own company, Code Squid, had originally built that for developing some front-end training. It's kind of morphed into mentoring, which is why I'm doing a talk this afternoon on career management. So I'm kind of all over the place today. My company, yeah, they said, please put this slide in. So that slide's in. If you guys don't care, we're in Columbus, Ohio. So observables are part of RxJS. Okay. Familiar with RxJS? Oh, very few. Okay. Those that are familiar, heavy, moderate? All staring at me? Okay. So, all right. How many have worked with Angular? Let's start there. Same group. Look at that. All right. Of those of you that haven't worked with Angular, I guess I'd almost back up and say, are you in the right room? Maybe?
I've got experience with .NET, a lot of .NET stuff with the reactive extensions and .NET with reactive libraries.
Okay, all right. So yeah, it fits right along with what we're talking about with RxJS, so that does make sense. All right, I just want to make sure we're in the right room. Okay, what problem does it solve? Reactive extensions, dealing with streams of things, right? Dealing with input where we have a really challenging time determining what came first, what came second, what came third, right? I make API calls to the back end, and depending on, if I get one that gets a data, the problem I had recently, the two requests got fired off, one for the unfiltered set of data, one for the filtered set of data. What we wanted was the filtered set of data, but came back with no results, so it came back a whole lot faster than the full list of results. So all of a sudden we saw what we needed, which was empty, and all of a sudden all this stuff showed up, and it's like, wait, that's not the filtered set. Right, out of order. And reactive extensions help with that quite a bit. Okay. In terms of RxJS, what I deal with, we're talking JavaScript front end, and it reacts to events or signals. Now in this term, it's lowercase signals. Okay. If you dealt with Angular at all, the new signals came out. This talk was made before that was a concept. Okay. It contains all the state, past events. It steps in a chain, okay? And it actually works reasonably well. So history of what we're talking about here, okay? JavaScript, when it first came out, was very light on what it could do. One of the first things that came in was the ability to make an API call. And we didn't even call it that at the time. We were sending something to the back end to get a request to come back. And things happen out of order, right? I send that call off, that GET request. I don't know when it's coming back, if at all, right? So I'd have to send this function in so that when the browser saw a response come in, it could fire that function off, maybe, for positive or negative results. And I had to handle both in there. And what you wound up with was this real nest of things, right? So if I had to make the first call to find out what the query set was, and then I had to make the second call to get the right page of data, and then a third call to do something else, you start nesting this thing down in, okay? And that was callback hell. Promises came out, which are really cool. Anybody here worked with a promise in front end? Okay, more hands, good, okay? They help, right? But how many of you had that then chain, and you're going inside that one and inside that one, right? So we do the same thing again. Okay, it's better. The try catch finally is significantly better than the standard callbacks. Right? Next round we had, and it kind of happened around the same time, the async await and the observables. But really, the next round in terms of readability was async await. How many have worked with async await with JavaScript? Just about the whole room. Good. Yes. Okay. Async await simply unwraps the promise. Okay. But if you've ever read that promise nested in with thens, and you read it without it, with the async await, the logic's a whole lot easier. I mean, stunningly better. Observables is a push-pull model, okay? And what we're talking about here is the consumer of that data is the king in this terms, and then the pull, okay, determines when it wants its data. Simple example is think of calling a function that returns something, returns a string or something like that, right? But what we're talking about in terms of observables is shifting to more of a pull model, okay? Push model, excuse me, where the producer of that data, where the data is coming from, wins, okay? It decides when it's sending that data. We have to have code to handle that, and the observables were one of the first rounds in handling that. So, concepts. Oh, sorry, I usually make sure my pocket's empty because I will play with anything in my pockets when I talk. It's really obnoxious. Okay, essential concepts. You have an observable, where it represents that idea of invoking. We have an observer, something that's watching for something to happen, okay? And we have that concept of a subscription. You can subscribe to when something happens, it passes that data through to whoever is subscribed, okay? We have operators, pure functions, enable functional programming style, when we're dealing with it. So things like the map, the filter, concat, reduce, where we start to chain things on that observable, right? We can manipulate that data as it comes through if needed. Subject, okay, event emitter equivalence. Allows us to multicast the observables. A pure observable should only have one subscription. There are models here that we'll look at in ArcGIS that can handle more than one. And then schedulers, these are dispatchers that can control that concurrency. Allow us to coordinate what happens when and where. Okay, good to have those concepts before we dig in deeper. And promises versus observables. Okay, observables are lazy. Promises are not. Okay, when you subscribe, you don't know if anything's going to happen. Right? With a promise, you know something's happening in there. You're handling it correctly because the code is in there that operates inside it. Observables handle multiple values. Promise occurs one time. Right? Once that resolve or reject fires, it's done. You can't do anything else with it. You have to create a new one. Okay, with an observable, we can get multiple data points coming through. Observables can be canceled. An error state could trigger a cancellation on it. And nice to shut those observables down so you don't get multiple of them running at one time. And we have those operators. I kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. Okay, the map, the for each, that kind of thing. So, subjects are a part of the observable space, and they have different purposes. Okay, plain observables are unicast. Remember, we can only have one subscriber. Subjects are all multicast, which means we can have multiple subscribers against it. Behavior subject is probably one of the ones I use the most. I like the behavior subject because it starts with a current value. Right? How many times have you written code and you expect null? Right? That's that first state. With the behavior subject, you have that first state. You know, when I'm displaying a table of data, my initial state is going to be an empty array. I don't need to account for null when I'm displaying that data, because I know it will always start there with that empty array. We have a replay subject, similar to behavior, except for the fact it can allow you to replay steps along the way. Right? So I can go back 3 steps or 10 steps or whatever and see that data come through. Financial side, that's kind of an important thing, right? To see how you got from where you were to where you are, right? There's an async subject. It's a variant that only fires the value when the last value comes through. That's kind of a handy one when I'm making a single API call, right? And we have a void subject. And the void subject's changed a little bit. I want to show you the code on that. It's really hard to describe. Code is better in that particular case. So here's the cool part of my slide deck. We get code. Can everybody read the code? Oh, back of the room there. Got really good eyes. You can read. Oh, we got a hand thumbs up back there. Good. Yes, I'm gonna say that's awesome. Okay? So what do we have here? We have a demo. Okay, this is the observable demo here. So we have essentially a new observable is created. We pass a subscriber in, we're sending 3 values, we do a set timeout of 1 second. We're firing the next, then we're completing the subscription. Completing the complete finishes the observable off. Okay, so then we got a console log just before subscribe. We have a demo demo piece down there. Let's go get my mouse over there. This is where this gets fun. As we can scroll down. There we go. Okay, we have this demo code that runs, that actually subscribes and handles next, error, and complete state. So we have console logs. Okay, and then we have console log before and after, and we should be able to run this code and something should happen. This is the part where I always get really nervous because sometimes it works exactly the way I expect. And sometimes it doesn't. It's hiding off the screen on us. Click that. And it's not expecting. There it goes. Ah, we're not going to see it. Oh, come on. Try and run it again. Oh, there we go. Hey, ran a couple times. Okay. So just before the subscribe, got a value 1, got a value 2, got a value 3, just after the subscription. What happened there? Okay. Let's see, something wrong never happened. We got values. There's a before subscribe, there's an after subscribe after. But here's the interesting part, okay? It was after that subscribe code, but we had that set timeout inside that sent before, which happened after the fact, and then closed out the observable. So basics of observables, really simple basics of observable. But look at our second set of code here. Simplified quite a bit. We subscribe, and instead of sending it the next and all that stuff, I'm just assuming the next. We're doing console log, we're passing the next, 3 nexts, and then 1 after 1 second timeout. So we should be able to see something very similar happen when we run this code. Assuming it's going to run. Did it run? Oh, it's not liking me today. Those should be 1, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, let's try clear the log. Wow, we all know how good live code is, right? Not gonna like me doing this. Let's run now. There we go. Oh, there we go, it worked. Yay! Just gotta run from that side instead of from my side. So before, we had the hello inside, we had the 42, the 100, 200. The after triggers, it's asynchronous because of the set timeout. And then the 300 triggers. We didn't have a close on this one, so technically it's still open. All right. Now we shift into the subjects. Okay, the code is a little different on the subjects. And let's see, can I toggle that close? Let's clear that log. So what do we have? Okay. Subject is a special type of observable, allows multicasting. Okay, plain observables are unicast, remember that. We're pulling in subject from our XJS. Had to do that for my demo to make it work. Don't always have to pull it in that way. Okay, and we created a new subject. Okay, we can type it as well if we wanted to. Okay, we're handling the next, which will console log the observer A. We also have a second subscription that's console logging observer B. Right, on subject, we're passing it values 1 and 2 after we subscribe. Should be pretty logical there what we're doing with this. I'm going to try this from this side again, and it just does not like that side. Okay. We're going to mouse it up here. Oh, it's not liking me. There we go. So as you can see, observer A and observer B both got both sets of values. Pretty straightforward, right? Nothing rocket science. It works. Behavior subject. This is the one I really like. And I'm just going to go ahead and refresh the page because I'm just going to assume it's not going to work. There we go. So our behavior subject. What are we doing? Okay. This is the one where we can set a default value. In this case, it's 0. we're subscribing before we change any values to observer A. We're changing the value 2 times, and then we're subscribing to observer B the second time with passing a value of 3 with the next. Right, so this is interesting. What's going to happen here as we run this? Well, will it run this is the first question. Oh, but it did run it. But notice observer A got value 0, got that initial value. I like that. We got 1 and 2, which came through because we didn't subscribe until after we had passed those 2 values. So then we subscribe, and subject next 3 is fired, which both subscriptions see at that point in time. So the point in time when you subscribe is as important as well. Does that make sense? Replay subject that records multiple values. And again, I'm going to come over here, and we're just going to refresh just to make sure, since it's getting glitchy on me today. Demo 4, pulling in the replay subject. We're setting up with an initial value. We're doing the same kind of thing we did before, where we subscribe with an observer A and observer B, passing 4 values. Okay. The interesting part is this replay subject 3 is not an initial value. That's how far back to go in history. Okay, when somebody subscribes late. So in this case, observer B should see 2, 3, and 4, going back in history 3. And then receive 5. Both of them should receive 5. Assuming my code runs well. Let's try it, see what happens. So A gets 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? We haven't even subscribed to B yet. B subscribes. As I said, 2, 3, 4 come through. Just as we expected, right? Then both get 5. Not sure where the open came from. Yeah, this is actually hooked into my console logs, so I'm not sure where that came from. Okay, pretty straightforward there. Right, we get the history replay. Kind of a handy feature sometimes. I actually haven't had a use for that in production yet. Would love to try find something at some point. Might build something. Oh, we had a second example, didn't we? All right, I gotta come up and refresh that again. Let's look at subject 2. What do we have here? Oh, this one's much more complicated. Okay, so we're going back 100 on the replay. We also have a window of time. 100 is only available for half a second. It's an interesting variant on that replay. So we subscribe, we're looping through until we get 10. Setting an interval, clearing an interval, 200 millisecond gap. So some of those will be past that 500 window. We're doing a 1 second delayed subscription for observer B. So it should be somewhere right around the end of those 10 running. Okay, assuming it works right, we're going to find out. So we get observer A, 1, 2, 3, whoa, we went really fast on some stuff, so what did we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on observer A. Okay, observer B is then subscribed at that point in time, and it goes back potentially 100, but only half a second back. Since we're at a 200 millisecond gap, it got probably about 3, right? So 3, 4, 5. And then they both start getting all the values till you hit the end of the cycle. Okay, so a replay that also accounts for time. Could have gotten 100, could have gotten all the way back to 1 if we'd had more time on it. It's an interesting use case. And then we have the async subject. This is the one that kind of, I won't say it confuses me the most, confuses people the most. But it's got use cases. All right, so take a quick peek at what we have here. So we have a demo. Looks very familiar, right? We're setting up async subject, 1, 2, 3, 4, observer B, firing the complete. What's our use case? Let's look at our comment up above. Okay, it's a variant where only the last value of the observable execution is sent to its observers. So you fire off half a dozen API calls, but you only want the last one. Right? Somebody's typing something, they pause, they're typing something, they pause, typing something, they pause. Each one of those you're firing off an API call, right? Based on that usually 600 millisecond gap of typing. But you only want the last one. We handle that. So we're going to run our code and both get 5. Okay? That completes it, we're done. The last value is the one that gets passed to the subscriptions. Irregardless of when they subscribed and what data occurred, what passed through in the meantime. That's kind of cool. You're probably one of the quietest groups I've ever had. There are usually questions all over the place. Notice I'm okay with that. We'll have lots of time for questions at the end. So void subject. Didn't talk much about this one, okay? I'll read this comment up here. Sometimes the emitted value doesn't matter as much as the fact that a value was emitted, right? Did something happen? Do I need to show that? One of the ones I use that for is usually like saving a file, right? The success of that. I don't care that it returned me the whole file after the save. What I care about is the fact that the save finished and finished correctly or it failed, right? So before version 7 of RxJS, we would do a subject any. We can now do a subject void, so that our emitted value, we know the emitted value should be a void. Okay. So we set up a new subject, then we subscribe, and we fire a next out there 1 second after it's run, and we don't care what values passed. What we care about is that it happened. Okay, so we come over here, we run our code. This is probably the most boring part of the demo. Oh, really the most boring part of the demo, since it doesn't work. It is not liking me on that one. I'm going to check that out. Run. Oh, there it goes. 1 second back. There we go. It's probably the most boring one I do, but really it is very useful in a few scenarios here and there where I don't care what the value is. I just care that the event happened. And when it comes to users dealing with the front end and interacting, that's a valuable piece of information to have. Okay? So, we've gone over promises versus observables, subjects, behavior subject, replay subject, async subject, void. I believe the QR code on the left is this slide deck. QR code on the right is a survey from me. I'm the only one that gets it. Okay? If I want the slide deck, make sure you put in an email so I can send it to you. The last 2 conferences I've done this one at, I had 3 people ask for the slide deck, but I had no other information other than like a first name. I don't know who John is. I know who Bob is, because that's me, right? So, yeah, if you're requesting something from me, give me information enough to get a hold of you, okay? So, a lot of information we covered. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, bored to tears, what? Yes?
You said the async subject was a confusing one, and indicated that async subject requires complete to be called.
Yes.
Okay, so if we had, for example, a observer that's detecting my heartbeat, and we unsubscribe when I leave the room, hopefully you will never get a value on that one because I will have never completed that.
Hopefully your heart didn't stop.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I'm on the same line.
Do you have a different take on that one?
No.
I happen to know he's got a little bit of expertise in this area, so. Okay. Does that make sense, what he asked? I probably should come over here and re-say the question since we're recording voice, which was about the async subject. You don't get a result until it completes, right? His example was, I've got it monitoring my heartbeat for, I would assume, stoppage of the heartbeat at some point. Where's that error condition, right? Maybe even an abnormal or something like that. When you leave that page, you leave the room, whatever you want to call it, it disconnects the subscription, so you never got a value because it didn't complete, because the heart didn't stop, the heart didn't trigger whatever that fault was.
I'm not very familiar with JavaScript in the deep mechanics of it, but what happens when the observer gets destroyed without subscribers unsubscribing? Is there
Well, that's literally what you're doing when you're shutting them down. Typically, you unsubscribe before the destruction. That's part of it. Yeah, you write the code to unsubscribe from them, to disconnect. If you don't disconnect, the observer is no longer connected to anything. But what I have seen happen is they don't get disconnected, that observer is still there in a service or something like that that doesn't get disconnected, and you come back and now you've got 2 or 3 subscriptions that fire and start doing really odd things. It's not so much as you destroy the observer, it's disconnecting those subscriptions that's the really important part. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, memory management is something that is, you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And on my heartbeat example, for example, if I walk out the room, then my heart's still beating, and so I'm still producing values as a observable, but you're no longer subscribed to me because you're not seeing me anymore.
But if you have a heart attack, he never completes anyway. Maybe something else, the
Right.
process happens, and you never
Right.
get to complete. But now you're waiting, and the observer is
You
gone.
have to know when to disconnect from it.
Yeah,
That's,
right.
that's usually the critical part. Signals has been an interesting one that's been out and about, and I don't go into it here. Haven't written a talk for it yet. But signals are a non-reactive. So step away from the react. And what I've seen in build code is you're about a 20% reduced in size, not bringing ArcGIS in. It's a pretty significant reduction. There are some cases where they're a little harder to manage, but because they're non-reactive, there are other issues now you have to account for, and they seem to work reasonably well. I don't have enough to talk much deeper than that. Yes?
When you say 20% reduction in size, is that size of the code downloaded or size in memory?
Production build. Yeah, I have intentionally at the moment has stayed away from using the newer, what is it? The stateless components, the disconnected components, where I would still want the full monolith build. So I'm looking at comparative. What did we have before with observables and a full build versus right in the newer components. You now can have standalone. That's the term I was trying to get to. Standalone components, so that your load can be significantly smaller depending on how you set it up. It's one I've stayed away from a little bit because I need to do some more research before I say here's how to use it. Most of what I've seen is everybody makes everything standalone, but is there a savings in that? I mean, if it's single page and you're rarely shifting, there may not be much. I've had environments where we had a dozen pages, a lot of shared components. I don't know how much savings there would be, right? If I had a dozen pages and they were completely different, isolated component sets, then there might be a lot of savings, especially if that one researcher or investigator, whoever it is, ends up on that one page and they never do anything else, right? They may be on just one or two. There could be a savings there. But I think it's one that needs thought out. It's not just throw it in there and hope it works. I still like the non-stateless builds myself. And so in a non-stateless, without the ArcGIS, yes, it's significantly smaller production build. Yeah. Good questions. Anything else?
Can you expound on garbage collection a little bit more? Are you saying that each subscriber should unsubscribe itself in every case, or?
Well, typically what you do with, I gotta stay close to the mic, sorry. Typically so garbage collection, yes and no, okay? Typically what you do is in your constructor of your component, you're doing your subscriptions, right? In there, what's returned is an ID. So you capture that ID, and what I typically do is I'll capture that ID in an array, right? So on the destruction of that component, I don't think it's NG destroy, but whichever one it is, it's easy to look up. You loop through those IDs and disconnect. Okay, unsubscribe at that point. So it's a whole component, whole page level type thing. So when I switch to another page, those all get disconnected before you exit that page. Does that make sense?
I think so. So who cleans up the observable? You wouldn't do that in your component, right? That's whoever owns the observable.
I haven't had a time when the operation of the observable has caused issues, memory management wise. I haven't had a need to destroy those. They're usually in services. So since they're in that service is always there and up and running. Have you had a case where you've had to destroy the observable itself?
I think it's been the case where if I have a page that has a list of things, and on each one of those list of things is its own observable, and I have subscribers when you access one of those things, I change the thing that I'm hooked to, and I remove a subscriber, and I go back, and then the observable still thinks that it has that subscriber, but if the subscriber has been disposed, it tries to push a message to the subscriber that it still had a handle to, but no longer exists. And that can be a problem. So that's not necessarily a case of the observable needing to be disposed, it's the subscriber needing to make sure the observable knows that it has been removed from and separate from the other.
So in that case, you'd probably need to clean up both at that destruction point. Okay, so for the microphone, I'm going to repeat a little bit of that. The cleanup time would be, you have an array of whatever objects, and in there is an observable that something else is subscribed to. So if that observable is removed, if that row is removed in the data set, you need to figure out how to do a proper cleanup of that subscriber as well. So that would make sense, yes. Yes.
Question. And in the unicast cases, let's say, and is there any difference we use a subject and the normal? That observable is.
Okay, what's the question?
Sorry,
No, it's okay.
I'm trying to rephrase it. And in unicast,
Unicast, right.
the cases, is there any big difference if I use a subject with the normal, that observer?
Okay, so the question, if I got it right, is there a major difference between using an observable itself that's unicast versus using a subject that's multicast, but only having one, I would assume, only having one subscriber attached to it?
Right.
There's no significant difference between those, no.
But I was, probably I was, but I was remember when do this angular stuff here, use this subject and observer, and the author strongly recommended you use a subject with narrow.
Well, okay, so strong recommendation of subject. My guess would be strong recommendation of subject over an observer would be it's that unicast operation, right? If your intent on that page or that component is to only have one subscription, yeah, the observable can work. But if your application grows and at some point in time you need another subscription attached to it, that observer then has to be shifted to a subject to be able to accommodate multiple subscriptions. Okay? Our code's not static, it changes. I can guess what the intent of my client is, right? The hardest thing we do is figure out what the business wants, right? They tell us what they want, and we have to take that, figure out that, and shift it to what they need. And so, so if you're guessing that there will only ever be one subscription, probably right. But why not use the subject that has that larger capacity just in case something changes down the road and the intent behind that code?
So from what you're saying, there's no the performance issue
No, there's no performance difference between the two that I've seen. Functionality-wise, they're nearly identical, and really shifting from an observable to a subject functionally is fairly simple. I use behavior subject out of the box. I just found it's easier to manage. You have that initial state. It does what I need. Yeah. Thoughts? Yes.
Yeah. I know in the early days at least, the guidance was only using subjects as the producer of the stream,
Mm-hmm.
not as a subscriber to the stream, and to use pure functions after that initial subject. And so while a subject can be both a subscriber and a producer, trying not to have additional subjects as stateful entities as compared to pure functions the pure functions was a more recommended strategy at that point. But again,
Mm-hmm.
things may have changed, and your particular use case may drive a different direction as well.
Yeah, I don't see much functional difference between the two. There's always interpretation of how to use them after it's instantiated and set up, but in general use case, it's just the multicast versus single cast. It's the largest blocker between using an observable and not. It's a good question.
That's
Okay.
probably
There's a lot of opinion on that one.
but I feel at least when coding, use subject is more neat.
Yes, absolutely. It absolutely feels that way. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, cleaner. Okay. Anything else? Good questions. Well, I'm giving you 3 minutes back. Thanks, guys.